Hey everybody, there are 5 days left until Edge of Fate, so today we're going to go ahead and rank subclasses. Now this one's going to be rough. I think a lot of you are going to see your favorite class somewhere and think it's bad or something like that. Or maybe you'll see your favorite class up high and think maybe it's not that good. I don't know. However, I want you to understand that pretty much every class is viable in endgame, and by that I mean every class is. You could do it without a subclass if you really wanted to. But for this argument's sake, we're going to put things in tiers based on how much I think it contributes to you completing content, how synergistic is it with the rest of your class, with your weapons, how flexible are they, what builds can you make with them. And there's this discussion we have to have on what makes a subclass good, right? Is it excelling at one specific thing very well? Does that make a good subclass? Or does being a very flexible subclass come into play? Or being able to do multiple things at once? What if it falls behind in one of those categories? Does being a requirement in certain situations make it a better class? The standout example of this is going to be Solar Warlock versus Prismatic Warlock. Well of Radiance is game warping on its own. It is probably the best super and mandatory in some cases, especially like in contest mode or in higher end raids where you need to stay alive during boss damage. Well's pretty much a must pick. You have to swap to it. No matter how good your other build is, almost always you're going to have to switch it to Well in these high damage situations. There are times where, yes, maybe Prismatic can get you by with 90% of that DR and the speaker's sight attached, you know, if you're using Song of Flame. But does that make it competitive? Are they equal? Or because there are times where Well of Radiance is the only option, that it's better than Prismatic? And I think that is a conversation that is important to have. But for these cases where you are in these situations where you are going to be swapping to a different loadout, I think it becomes much less important what class you're running through the whole activity, because for the most part that's going to be during raids and dungeons when you are able to swap loadouts. Now in Grandmaster Nightfalls where you are loadout locked, you don't really have to sit in one spot and take damage most of the time. There are certain Nightfalls where it's much easier to play it with the Well of Radiance, like some of the Cosmodrome, like some of the Battleground GMs are much easier with a Well than without a Well. But you aren't necessarily needing it the entire way through. And some of the other classes can bring much more value throughout the strike, and that might be of higher importance to you than being able to pop Well for the damage phase. That's probably going to be like the most extreme example because Well of Radiance is just so important to the metagame. But I want you to consider that with each of these subclasses that I am trying to take into account how flexible it is, what options do you have if you're trying to tune this to different activities, how much work can you do on the class without having to swap to a different class. Now, as well, these are going to be obviously compared to each other in its entirety. We are comparing Arc Warlock to Strand Titan, but the correlation between each individual class is stronger than between classes. There are plenty of people who play this game who do not play all three classes. Maybe you play one, maybe you play two, but for the people who play all three, these are going to be compared to each other lightly, but for everybody who's playing one or two characters, it's much more important to pay attention to how each class is stacking up to each other than it is to the other classes. So again, just to reiterate, this is a high difficulty list. So this is for Expert Plus, Legend campaigns. We're talking Nightfalls, Grandmasters, contest raids, master raids. And while all of these do have their place, you can use them if you want. I don't think you're going to be, losing just because you're on the wrong subclass or something like that. We've come a long way since the Witch Queen. When we're getting the 3.0s, the subclasses are much stronger than they used to be. They're going to provide great value, but some of them I think are just much more potent than others. So starting us off, I want to get the obvious elephant in the room out of the way, which is Prismatic. Prismatic classes are a tier above all the other classes, if you can't tell by this triple S tier. Prismatic gets ahead because it is not only super flexible with these exotic class items that only it can use, it can make powerful use of your regular class exotics as long as the part that the exotic effects is on Prismatic, but they also have Transcendence, which is a level of power above the other subclasses. I do hope that one day we might see some form of transcendence go to these other classes. For example, if Matter Spark was ever to leave Kepler and become a transcendence-esque effect for Arc subclasses, that might actually help Arc compete with Prismatic more. So that's something that I think we could maybe see in the future. But in the now, having Transcendence at all is a huge power spike over other classes. Not to mention just the aspects being brought over, being much more powerful and more flexible to use together. So you can combine things that you wouldn't normally combine on a solo class, like say Void and Stasis weapons that you wouldn't normally put together, because your class can now use Void and Stasis aspects that both benefit from the aspects they wouldn't normally benefit from. The main thing that, like, example 2 is Gunpowder Gamble. Gunpowder Gamble now works with any element instead of just being solar, right? So that is much more flexible on Prismatic than it is on regular solar. So these 3 classes are going to go to the top of the list. Now, within each rank, these are not going to be ranked within the ranks for the most part. This triple S tier is going to be the exception, because I think there is a clear hierarchy where Warlock is going to be the most flexible Prismatic class, and probably the best Prismatic class going into the expansion. Prismatic Hunter, I want to give points to. It is, capable of solo one-phasing the Witness, right? Like, there's people doing that right now. So obviously it has a very high power spike. It can reach great levels of power, but it's not always going to be reaching that. Those are really complicated to achieve. There's a lot of under the hood stuff going on with the weapons and the mod loadouts. That's not necessarily the subclass, but we're using Nighthawk, we're using Golden Gun, so it's only achievable on Hunter, right? But for the most other content, it's harder to get that kind of value out of Hunter, while it's much easier to get value out of Warlock. Devour is strong, Hellion is always strong, Lightning Surge is a powerful melee that Hunter doesn't have access to, very good AoE clear that Hunter would need something like Caliban's to make up for. As well, Titan getting nerfed with Consecration, it is like the standout Titan build, and the reason it's been so standout is the other aspects that are on Prismatic Titan haven't really come up into their own to compensate for Consecration being nerfed. I think there are powerful combinations that we haven't been testing enough. There are plenty of builds that you can do with Prismatic Titan, but it's just been unexplored because Consecration's been so overpowering. I think Consecration going into the expansion is still going to be an amazing add and major clear. It's not going to delete champions anymore, or mini bosses or bosses, but I think that's where your weapons come in. And you have still, T-Crash to use in those situations, or the axes that can boost your damage, but the flexibility of Prismatic, just with every class having good one-off supers and having good roaming supers and good niche supers for at different use cases, you have all of that on each of these classes. So it's really hard to say that Prismatic isn't in its own tier. So I'm going to put these up here. I do have notes on the side, so if I start looking over to the side, I'm looking at my notes. If you want to get like an idea, these are multi-paragraph sections, so there's a lot. I put a lot of things in here for each class. But for Warlock specifically, we have Devour. Speaker's Sight is a viable option. It does compete with Well of Radiance in 90% of content. Like, if you're in a raid scenario and you pop Song of Flame and you had a Speaker Sight turret down, are you going to notice not having a well? Maybe for a little bit, you might be getting a little bit less damage, but if it's not, 20 under, it doesn't matter nearly as much. So for the most part, in most content that's endgame, you can get away with Prismatic Warlock Song of Flame. It does lose a little bit of points because it doesn't have Well of Radiance, but it's not enough to make it a bad class. In addition, Elemental Honing is going to be great. Getaway Artist is still going to be great. Lightning Slide is going to be better with the new damage scalers on melee. So it's a very powerful, very flexible class that can do just about anything in the game. In addition, the aspects on it all combine together very well. There's nothing that makes like a negative synergy, which I think Hunter and Titan do have those kind of things on here. So Prismatic Hunter. It's moved up to second place. I think Prismatic Hunter used to be in third place because Prismatic Hunter was in third place because Consecration used to be at the top. Now it's going to fall behind to third place. Prismatic Hunter, very strong. Combination Blow has always been a very strong ability on Arc. Moving on to Prismatic, where you intrinsically get invisibility with the damage bonuses. You can stack it with Gunpowder Gamble. You can stack it with Winter Shroud for really good shatter damage, building up Transcendence pretty quickly. You could do Threadlings if you wanted to with the Threaded Spectre and bypassing that cooldown. So it is very flexible, very fun loadout. Prismatic Hunter also still has the best exotic class item, I think, with some of the craziest combinations on it. We're talking Galanor, we're talking Calibans, Liars, Synthos being on there, obviously. But even like the class specific ones are all very strong. There's a lot of possible combinations, and even regular hunter exotics like Radiance Dance Machines, Mask of Fealty, etc., being good on this class. The standout obviously being Hoyle's Arachne for most people, being very good to go take into endgame, giving you damage resist as well as massive cooldowns. And Ascension is going to proc that going forward. Gifted Conviction is also very popular on Prismatic Hunter. All of the aspects on Prismatic Hunter are useful. They're strong aspects, but there is some like anti-synergy here or there where things like Threaded Spectre give you a much longer cooldown for your dodge just for having it equipped because of PvP. You're not getting the Threadlings anymore because of PvP whenever it blows up. Like the enemy has to come near or destroy it. If you break it, it doesn't work. So like there are these like little niche things that are kind of small anti-synergies. We are going to see Ascension get less fragment slots, which I think is a bit of a excessive nerf for Ascension. It's not disgusting. However, they are going to make it scale with Combination Blow. So that might actually be a stupid good combo coming up. Not just on Prismatic, but also on Arc. If the damage of Ascension is scaling, that's AoE clear on top of the Jolt with the Combination Blow buff. So it might scale with something like Synthos as well. Something to keep an eye on. It has much better synergy than any one of the Hunter subclasses, but most of the standout aspects of each of these subclasses was taken by Prismatic. So it has just become like the best place to do Hunter things. On top of that, with the exotic class item, Hunter is finally able to use these class neutral exotics like Verities and Synthos that the other classes have had access to that give them like some consistent thing to build into in any of their classes. Like, you know, Verity Warlock has always been strong, Syntho Titans has always been strong. Hunter hasn't really had an exotic that's done that. Maybe Star Eaters, where, you know, all of our supers are strong, but building into supers before now has been kind of rough. Going into the expansion, it might be even better. That might be like a new actual standard kind of build to build into, building into super. But just having access to that has made the Hunter grenades and the Hunter melees feel so much stronger than they used to. Threaded Spike and the Stasis melee and even Combination Blow have felt so good with like Synthos, and even like Magnetic Grenade. Gunpowder Gamble feels great with Verities, and these are things that just Hunter has not had the chance to use because we don't have anything that like buffs those intrinsically. So Prismatic Hunter is the ultimate Hunter class, I think, and that kind of pulls a lot of steam out of the rest of the Hunter subclasses, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So Prismatic Titan is sliding down to third place just because it feels like it's going to have a little bit of a synergy issue going forward. I think Prismatic Titan, again, has some really good aspects on it. It is a very powerful build to build around. You're going to have Transcendence. It's just going to feel a lot weaker without the power spike that Consecration's been giving it. It's going to still be competent. Consecration is going to be a very powerful build with or without killing majors and champions, right? Just being able to clear a room with it and having multiple ignitions go off at once is a very powerful effect. You're going to be able to run that, you're going to be able to clear with it, and you're going to have to use your heavy maybe a little bit more, but I think with the new heavy changes and the ammo changes, it's going to feel great. The main thing holding Prismatic Titan back from being higher is that the options with your other aspects feel a little weird sometimes. Diamond Lances, I think, are strong, but they're not Consecration. The Unbreakable aspect has been buffed so many times, and it is very strong, but it feels like this commitment to having to hold block to get the most value out of it. Like maybe you are using it for damage, you want to let it charge a little bit and then let it go, but it feels like if you aren't holding it down, if you are blocking for your teammates, are you going to do more damage with that grenade, or are your two teammates going to do more damage by shooting the enemies while you stand there holding grenade? And making a very passive, you have to hold this button down and stand there and take it kind of ability, while it is strong, it's a strong aspect, it feels sad to play with. It feels like you're not doing very much, which is similar to how some people feel about strongholds. And that is obviously also a very strong pick. They do similar things. This is like stronghold the aspect. And you do get refunds for it when you're using Ursa's, so you can keep the uptime on this up very well. It just feels sluggish with some of the other builds. Knockout still feels like a must pick fragment. I mean, the buffs to it, giving it more melee damage going forward, on top of its old buff being getting instant healing instead of health regen, it feels like the best way to make sure you're having sustain in your Titan, and building into that damage buff is still going to be very strong going into Edge of Fate. We still have the multiplier on 200 melee. We are still going to have strong melees. Worm God is getting buffed. Synthos still going to be good. So it's hard to say get rid of your only healing factor to take something else. I think Prismatic Titan is obviously not going to fall out of this tier. It's practically impossible. It's going to take a little bit of work to rebuild new builds that will compete and take over the new top spots in the list. It is totally possible that we'll come up with a really cool Drenger's Lash Diamond Lance build that will skyrocket this back up to Triple S. That will skyrocket this back up above Warlock. Or even Consecration might just not be that bad, in all honesty. I think it's going to be a little bit of testing and trial, but just off rip, this is my ranking for the Prismatic builds. But as you can tell, they're still disgustingly broken. I think one of the other advantages of Prismatic Titan is you don't have to really switch off very often. You don't have to get onto a different class to do your super. T-Crash is on here already. If you need Ad Clear, you've got Behemoth, you've got Berserker. You need Weaken and a one-off super, you've got Axes on here. But Titans at least have this very flexible super option. The only real restriction in swapping your super is changing what your Facet of Purpose does. So sometimes if you really want Restoration or Overshields and you have to switch to T-Crash, you are losing a little bit of value getting Bolt Charge instead. For the next set of elements, we are going to go alphabetically, so we're going to start off with Arc. Now, Arc has some pretty good loadouts, I think. Most of these are very strong, and that might partially be Bolt Charge. Flashover is something we've had in the artifact all season, so it's been like, what, 4, 5, 6 months of triple damage Bolt Charge. So it's felt really good, and then we might be a little bit blindsided by how much weaker it's going to be without that. However, I think the pure value of Bolt Charge is not going to change. They are very powerful effects. They give you quite a lot of flexibility in adding burst damage to your loadout. Every class is able to take advantage of it in some way. Now, Arc Titan got the best treatment out of all of this. Storm's Keep is like the new required thing in a boss phase. So Warlocks have to get in well, and if Titans have to switch, they have to switch to Arc to put on Storm's Keep. Now, we are going to be limited to one Storm's Keep barricade being beneficial at once. I think that's fine. That's very healthy, not making it so that every Titan in your team has to switch to Arc. However, if you want to do optimal damage, you need to bring one Arc Titan. Because of that, I think Arc Titan gets to go into the S+ tier. Arc Titan is extremely strong. You still have knockout for healing. Your Touch of Thunder grenades are still very strong, right? Being able to use Pulse Grenade to get Ionic Traces consistently and feed back into your abilities, or just using Storm Grenade, which is getting a boss damage buff, which I don't think it really needed. It was already the highest or second highest damage grenade. It is very competitive with Pulse Grenade, or like neck and neck. With a little bit more ease of use, and it would chase enemies around. So those are both very strong options if you want to play a more mid-range build. And you want to take Storm's Keep. Obviously, building into Bolt Charge passively is super, super strong, and it's always fun to watch things blow up. Rally Barricade is very beneficial, so taking that over the big barricade is a choice that I usually tend to make. I like the reload speed buffs, and I feel safe enough with it. But even if you're using Thruster, getting that quick charge is not bad. It won't let you discharge with weapons, which I think is the main benefit of Storm's Keep. So something to keep an eye on. But if you are running just Arc Titan all the time, you can do Knockout. You can take Ballistic Slam, which now has scaling damage for how far you travel. And for anybody who doesn't know this, because it doesn't say it on the ability, but it has been true since it came out in Forsaken, hitting an enemy with Ballistic Slam gives you 3% of your super per hit. Not per kill, per hit. That is still a thing. And with the super changes, it should also scale with that. So if you are running Ballistic Slam and Thunder Crash, that is still a great combination. And with Curus, that should scale to give you really crazy super gains going into the expansion. So keep an eye on that. However, if you want to just use Thunderclap, it's the easier melee. So like, go for it. Either way, you still have the option of using Curus. You've got Skullfort here. You've got regular Hoyle that you could be running. Peregrine Greaves goes well. You have a lot of flash options, and if you need a roaming super, because roaming supers have their place, I think, in endgame content with their fast charge time and a lot of bonus effects now with 3.0 integrations. So if you need a roaming super for a GM, Fist of Havoc is pretty good. You could put on Insurmountable Skullfort. No, not Skullfort. Mask of the Eternal Warrior to get Trample, which will get you ability energy back on kill. It will blind, so it's anti-unstop. And it's pretty fun. It does decent damage. They have good total damage roaming supers right now, but they're not like instant one-shots, so there's a little bit more finesse to stun and use it and get the damage out of it, but it will keep you alive very often. So great, flexible Arc subclass. Now, the next Arc subclass I want to talk about is going to be Arc Strider, which is our Hunter class. This is going to go into a regular S tier because it doesn't have something like Storm's Keep keeping it up. Ascension, which is its new like standout aspect, it's like really powerful. Most people are running with something like Gift of Conviction, is kind of getting stolen by Prismatic. It's losing a little bit of thunder on that. You still have Flow State and Lethal Current if you want to really build into Combination Blow, Liar's Handshake builds, or Assassin's Cowl. The issue is you're not taking Stylish, which has a lot of built-in synergy and even more damage bonuses stacked on top. So it's a hard sell to run Arc over Prismatic, but I think if you don't have Prismatic as like an option, or you're just not interested in running Prismatic, I think Arc is a top competitor for Hunter. It is not as necessary or as breaking as an Arc Titan, but it is still going to let you be able to solo GMs. People have been doing that for years with Assassin's Cowl. The 1-2 punch hand cannons that we're going to get will be extremely powerful because that means you can use 1-2 punch on every punch, but you don't have to worry about your green economy at all. You can just keep that up, and you won't be killing them with the hand cannon as easily as you will with the shotgun, which might mean if you're looking for a heal or something like that, that you get that more consistently. Sometimes if you just one-shot and add with the shotgun and you don't get the kill with the melee, you're not getting healed or going invis. So it'll reduce weird situations like that in endgame. I think Tempest Strike is a pretty powerful aspect that it's not as good as like Lightning Surge or Consecration, but it is Hunter's only slide melee, and they have been giving it buffs. So I think it is something that's like nice to play with every now and then. You know, it's mid-range, it's jolting, it gives you bolt charge for killing jolted targets. So that with Flow State, which gives you faster dodge cooldown, which once dodge no longer is tied to being close to an enemy, lets you be even more of like a mid-range brawler with this kind of setup, is going to be very strong for bolt charge. Or you could tack on something like Lucky Raspberry, which I personally like with Arc Bolt grenades, because every jolt tick of damage you do will give you like 20% of your grenade back, and it, can be obviously jolting on hit. So you can get consistent grenade, pair that with Tempest Strike to get bolt charge on jolt kill. You're getting weapon hits to charge it up and trigger the jolt and give you your grenade back, and then discharge it. The jolt will usually be discharging it, but just in case you need an ability to directly apply it, you'll have pretty much constant uptime on your arc grenade, especially if you're running something like jolting feedback or volt shot, depending on the difficulty. Like we said, Ascension getting a damage boost from combination blow should be a really powerful synergy that this is going to have access to, along with something like Flow State to give you more dodge cooldown in case you're running something that needs you to be a little bit further away, a little bit safer. You could do that. We also have the option of Blight Ranger if you're weird and like to block, and you can do that defensively and spawn a lot of orbs. I wouldn't recommend it most of the time, but it's an option that you have. I think Arc Hunter has really good supers. Obviously, we have Gathering Storm, which is a nice passive damage super, kind of similar to Silence and Squall, but Prismatic also has that. You have the option of Raiden Flux. Yeah, you have the option of Raiden Flux Arc Staff if you want to go crazy with a roaming super. Raiden Flux is my personal favorite exotic in the game, and Arc Staff is my favorite super. So they go great together. They scale great into endgame with some crazy super damage. It takes a lot of your time, so you are going to want to build around being in super and building super energy, which we're going to be able to do a lot more consistently now that the super stat is going to do something. So something to keep an eye on. And you do also have the option of Storm's Edge, which is fine, I guess. It doesn't really do anything. If you want to be fast, maybe it can be a cool speedrunning trick, but that's about all that super does. But at the end of the day, a lot of blinding effects in here. Disorienting Blow's got some buffs. It's got some AoE on it now. It's got Blind. Obviously, Blind's one of the most powerful status effects. We used to use blinding grenade launchers. You can do just blinding in general now. I think that is still a powerful effect. Not taking damage is better than healing. But however, these both have healing built into them. These both being Arc Titan and Arc Hunter. So I think if you aren't going to be running Prismatic, Arc is a wonderful choice to take in the endgame. Finally, Stormcaller is going to go in A tier. And this is for a very specific reason. I think without the artifact buffs and without the artifact buffs, Arc Warlock is a little bit overshadowed by Prismatic. Now, you do have Geomags on Arc Warlock, which is really strong, right? We're not going to deny that Arc Geomags with Chaos Reach is not a very strong super, and if you're able to, jolt targets a lot and get the Ionic Traces consistently, you can build into it quite often, and it's very, very strong. The main issue is it doesn't have a fast one-off super for damage phases or for nuking a champion immediately. If you fail to kill it while it's stunned, like an unstop might become unstunned, and then you may not get the kill or might use more of your super than it needs to. So you are losing a little bit of flexibility there. However, it is still disgustingly good when you are able to get Geomags up and running and you're getting these Ionic Traces. I don't think the nerf from 7 to 4% is going to be super significant because I believe it is going to scale with your super stat. So at 100, you should be getting about 6%, which is almost negligible, right? With how many Ionic Traces you're making, how much more energy you're going to be getting for dealing damage and getting kills. I think it's all going to come together and be about the same, if not even better than right now. But it also doesn't have built-in healing like the other Arc subclasses do, or like Devour, like Prismatic does. You are able to run Arc Souls, and Arc Souls are one of the best team abilities in the game, because for every person that's on your team that can walk through your rift and pick up an Arc Soul, the better it gets. It scales better with more people, and if you're able to be amplified, it gets even better, right? However, if you're able to drop this for your whole team, this can tack on an extra super or two over the course of a damage phase. Especially if you have like a hunter who's using Ascension nearby to give everybody amplified, and you ramp up the Arc Soul damage, that will give everybody like 2 extra supers worth of damage over the damage phase. Now, is it the most consistent? No. Will it steal your kills and ruin some of your streaks? Yes. If you're trying to keep like a damage perk up on your weapon that relies on kills, you will miss that. If you need to proc an effect like volatile rounds or anti-barrier, you might miss that because of Arc Soul. Maybe you'll miss Volt Shot in the weapon. Your teammates might lose their builds because of Arc Soul. So there's a little tiny bit of anti-synergy with Arc Soul that I think everybody's aware of if you've played with it, but that doesn't make it any weaker than it would normally be. On top of that, Lightning Surge is still strong. However, anything that you could do to get bonus damage on Arc Surge, you could probably get better on Prismatic. I think the real main standout of Arc Warlock is being the ability spam build, and you can spam high power grenades with Crown of Tempest or Fallen Sunstar, which are both really great regen exotics. You've got Storm Dancers to be a super maniac if you want to be running Storm Trance. I know a lot of people prefer Geomags with Chaos Reach over Storm Trance. I still think Storm Trance is a very good super, especially with Storm Dancer's Brace, which gives you bonus damage and cooldown back up to triple damage at 10 kills. And when you drop Landfall, it's a mini nuke, so it's kind of a little bit of a one-off nuke button for champions and higher tier content. Again, roaming supers I think are really great. Having the flexibility to go to Chaos Reach is good for when we want to do high damage to a boss. I think the thing is, this is better in a Nightfall than it is a raid scenario. Because in a Nightfall, where you have unlimited time to do damage, you are looking for more total damage than instant damage, unless you're trying to kill champions with it. Whereas in a raid scenario, you need to fit it in the damage window, and Chaos Reach becomes more of a liability there. Ionic Sentry is also a great aspect, I think. It takes a little bit of work to build into. You have to do arc damage or kinetic damage to charge it. We have a great number of arc and kinetic weapons to build off that with, including if you're doing something like I'm doing with my current arc build, which is Getaway Artist with Ionic Sentry and Electrostatic Mind. So you can do the double buddy setup. That's pretty fun. Electrostatic Mind is the obvious standout aspect on this that didn't get pulled to Prismatic, and that's kind of what makes this stand out over Prismatic, is your ability to pretty much every kill without cooldown making Ionic Traces. As long as you're killing a jolted target with Jolt or with an arc ability, you can just spam abilities, right? It is crazy how many Ionic Traces you can generate, and they can give you Bolt Charge or other benefits depending on what you slot into your class. I think the only reason it's not higher is that Touch of Thunder went to Titans instead of Warlocks. If Warlocks had roaming storm grenades and the rest of their aspects, it would probably also be S plus tier, if not S tier. But because it doesn't, because it's a little more limited, it's going into this A tier, which is still disgustingly good. We're going to lose the extra bolt charge damage. Sometimes a lot of your abilities will trigger bolt charge on things that you're not trying to, proc bolt charge on. I think that's another thing, putting this down just a little bit. It's not a deal breaker at all times, but you will notice it happen. Just your bolt charge will randomly go off on a thrall a mile away that your turret decided to hit. And you're like, well, that's wasted. So just a little bit of wasted value. Still very strong. Two very strong supers. No one-off super. No direct build-in with healing. Obviously, you have your Rift, but that's more of a Warlock thing than a subclass thing. Every class is going to have that. Following up Arc, we're going to go to Solar. Solar is a great element. It is not getting any significant changes as a subclass going into the expansion. We're not losing anything. We're getting some artifact bonuses, so you're going to have a little more access to Radiant, a little bit of Solar slag stuff going on. Nothing that's going to completely take this off the chart or take it down. Not a classy restoration type situation coming up, but we are in a very strong state for Solar just in general. Restoration and Ember of Empyrean have been strong, and they will remain to be strong. I think there is one thing here that has to be noted, and that is that Dawnblade, with Well of Radiance being in the game, is the only thing that gets to go into the Prismatic tier, because not even Prismatic can compete with the value of Well of Radiance, and that's just how the game is. Well is that strong. Dawnblade, sure, it doesn't have Transcendence, but we do have Speaker's Sight on there with Ember Benevolence, which is ridiculous uptime on top of, Phoenix Dive and Well. Hellion's on here now, and Hellion has been great value, but if you're on Solar, you can get more ignitions than you would on Prismatic, and it feeds back into itself with 100% uptime, as long as you take Singeing with Phoenix. As long as you're taking Singeing with Phoenix Dive, that's guaranteed come off cooldown. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. That is a very powerful engine on its own. You can already never die on this class. If you have a team with you that you can heal, by healing your teammates, you're also never going to die on this class. You'll have your abilities up constantly. You can keep torches up very easily. You can jump in the air and do Sunbracers. Sunbracers is a disgusting loadout, as we talked earlier. The Solar Grenades are not bad. We're going to see the Awakening of Starfire Protocol. That's going to be a great build going forward. We're going from 2.5% to 7.5%, as long as you have your we're going from 2.5% to 5% super energy per hit, but if you have 100 on your grenade, you should be getting 7.5% per, something like that. Maybe it was 7.5 and we're going up to 11 or 12% per hit. Either way, very, very strong buff to the regen on the exotic. You are going to benefit from it while being Radiant, so you won't need to take Empowered Rift anymore. You can just take a regular Phoenix Dive and then Torches for Radiant, and then you can take Empyrean to keep that up. So you're pretty much always going to be benefiting for Starfire. We are getting, very good effects to add some extra damage on there, but Fusion Grenades with Touch of Flame have been strong. They are going to remain strong. I don't think they're getting a damage buff. They're not one of the grenades that are getting the 15% for bosses, but they don't need it. They're already really strong. And if you go over to the 200 grenade stat, you're going to get 65% more damage on these things. So yes, they might recharge a little bit slower than they used to, but 65% bonus damage on Starfire, even if you're only getting, half the grenades, you have to account for your grenade cooldown already being faster on just at base than it used to be. And you're getting the 65% bonus damage. So it's almost equal to what it used to be in terms of damage. You're not going to be getting as great of the uptime on the demo refill. But if you were doing demo Starfire back in the day, you will know that demo was faster. Sorry, you will know that Starfire was faster than demo. So you were often holding your grenade, waiting for demo to be ready to proc again. If this is just long enough that you can throw your grenade off cooldown and every time is about the time it takes for your demo to be ready to use again, that's going to be an amazing upkeep piece that is going to outpace autoloading for any of those rotation builds. Obviously, MVS Arsenal is still going to be really good. It's probably still the best. But if you are working into grenade builds, that might be something to keep an eye on. Now, on top of that, obviously you have Phoenix Protocol as well, which is like infinite Well of Radiance uptime. Well is going to give you anti-barrier just for being in it. It gives you Radiant when you leave it. We have exotics that are going to give us restoration. We have regular abilities that give you restoration. Touch of Flame healing grenades on their own are one of the best healing sources in the game. So Solar Warlock is almost unkillable in anything where you're able to either chain kills or just have a teammate to give restoration to give yourself your cooldowns back. It is very active and or very passive depending on your choice. You can choose to run something like Hellion and hang back, or to choose to run something like Sunbracers and be very aggressive. Well skating is obviously one of the best movement techniques that's only on this class. And this wasn't part of my ranking. I wasn't thinking about well skating, but well skating is game breaking, and here it is, you know? I think it is a hard sell to say Well of Radiance is anything but the best 1.0 subclass. Sorry, the best 1.0. I think it's very hard to say that Dawnblade is anything but the best solo subclass in terms of like solo element, but here it is, top of the charts. If Prismatic was not here, Well would be here. So after that, we are going to see a bit of a drop off. We're going to talk about Solar Titan next, which I think is the next best Solar. And Solar Titan is extremely good. It is probably still one of the best solo content classes. We're going to go into solo dungeons and stuff like that. This is a very good one to take. Why? What makes Solar Titan as good in some situations as Consecration on Prismatic? Very simple. Sunspots. Sunspots with Soul Invictus are disgusting. Sunspots have always been really good ever since they came out, but with the 3.0 rework, where you get restoration from them on top of, you know, doubled the regen rate on your abilities for walking through, they have become extremely good survival sources. I mean, it's very easy to get a kill on a scorched enemy, or with a solar weapon, or with a solar ability, or to apply Scorch. If you have Roaring Flames up, you can melee to Scorch enemies with your regular melee, which will spawn sunspots. There are plenty of exotics that add additional ways to spawn sunspots, or to power up your sunspots. But even if you did nothing but just spawn a sunspot, it will, you know, damage enemies, cause Scorch. It'll give you some extra ignitions here or there, and just passing through it gives you restoration and ability cooldown, which is everything that you want an ability to do, and that's just in one aspect slot. You know what I mean? You still have Roaring Flames, which is going to get a buff to 200% bonus melee damage, which if you're using Bonk build is going to outscale what it does now with Synthos, even with the cooldown. Now you can throw melees in there as well with your regular melee, and as long as you have Roaring Flames up, that's going to cause your regular melee to cause Scorch, which will ignite in 3 hits if you have Ember of Ashes. Very strong to, you know, do in between your melees. It does look like the melee cooldown on Bonk Hammer might be like instant again with the strength scaler in some of the footage. So keep an eye on that. This might even go even higher, right? With some of the artifact mods, this might go up to S tier, but this might go up to S plus tier. But I think once you see what else is in S plus tier, you're going to understand why this is in just S tier. And saying just S tier is like funny. I just think a lot of these classes break open a lot of the endgame that we have, and that might change with a lot of these modifiers that we're going to get in the portal, right? We're going to be able to make things much harder than they have been in a while. So this might shift significantly once we're running like no HUD, -50 light, Nightfalls with 4 Banes and 8 different champions. You know what I mean? So this is for the content we have right now going into the expansion. How would it compare 1-to-1? Solar Titan has 100% uptime on Restoration, on Radiant, because you can just throw your hammer every second and get Radiant again. You don't even need to wait for a cooldown or anything. You don't need a kill. Um, you can keep that going with Empyrean. You are able to run Consecration if you want. Consecration's on here. It's not bad. It's never been bad on Solar. I've been running it for a long time. You could run this with the extra fragment slot now. There's a lot of built-in melee regen on killing scorched enemies. Getting ignition kills will give you grenade energy. So there's great ways to build back into Consecration and get it to be not as spammable as 3 melee charges would be, but you will be a little bit stronger because you could use Roaring Flames with that. You would be giving up sunspots, but if you just keep sunspots, then you don't have the damage, but you have restoration on top of that and more cooldown. So it evens out. I think you can make some very interesting choices with that. You do have 2 options of super. Yes, it is Hammer of Soul and Burning Maul, which are both roaming supers, but in the situation where you're in a raid or something and you need a one-off super for your damage phase, but you need something that's really survivable, really reliable for restoration or something like that, just to keep you alive through a crazy mechanic phase. Sunspots are probably the best way to stay alive through the mechanics phase, and Pyrogales will be the best swap to exotic probably without having to change classes, because you can swap from whatever you're using, Synthos, Worm Gods, to give you melee damage, to give you sunspots, to give you restoration, to Pyrogales, which will turn your Burning Maul into a one-off super that does very good damage, very good stagger, but it is, slightly slower, only one at a time. But it is that flexibility that some of the other classes don't have, like Storm Trance, right? Or Arc Warlock. If you're running something like Phoenix Cradle, you can give restoration to your teammates. Running healing autos, like Benevolence, is also very strong on Titan. There's a lot of ways to consistently give buffs to your teammates to proc that. So once again, this is a amazing S tier option. Finally, Gunslinger on Hunter is the final Solar class. It is going to go in B tier. And I want you to understand why it's in B tier. Because there's a lot of people who run Nighthawk, we're running Radiant, we're running GPG. But I think everything that Solar had special going on for it's pretty much on Prismatic. You want to run Nighthawk, just run Prismatic. It's better damage. It's as good cooldown. You've got a better synergy in the build. You've got just as much uptime on Radiant because you can just run a combination blow, which procs Radiant on every time you hit with it active. You don't need to worry about Gunpowder Gamble killing you. You've got restoration on orbs instead of needing to run Healing Grenade or getting Ember of Mercy to proc. It's just easier to play Solar Hunter on Prismatic than it is on Solar. Now, do you have Empyrean on Solar? Yeah, sure, you do. You can keep Restoration going and Radiant going. And there's, refunding your melees if you want to run a melee build like Ophidius phase or something fun like Shards of Galanor with Blade Barrage. That is an option. You can do that. But is Blade Barrage, Shards of Galanor as good as Nighthawk with just anything on Prismatic? Probably not. You're probably going to have a better time in endgame running Combination Blow, Stylish Executioner with Nighthawk. And you get the one-shot champions. You get to put in consistent boss damage. You get to enjoy restoration with your orbs. And you get to have damage resist from being surrounded. It is just really hard to argue that you should run Solar Hunter. And even with the changes, we're getting a Gunpowder Gamble buff that getting kills with any element should provide energy for Gunpowder Gamble. And that's really cool for regular Hunter. Like if you're running Hawk Moon, because you want to be a really stylish hand cannon hunter, right? You will now get Gunpowder Gamble on kills with that. But that's also going to be the same on Prismatic. So it's a moot point, and that just goes to Prismatic because Prismatic has Transcendence, which will also boost your damage even more. So the only unique thing that we're buffing for Solar Hunter, and they have said that Solar Hunter is going to get more buffs in the future. They are looking at Solar Hunter. That was one of the notes with this buff, is On Your Mark is going to get Radiant once you're at full stacks and you get headshot kills and continued kills while at full stacks of On Your Mark. I don't think access to Radiant was a problem for Solar Hunter. And On Your Mark was not being run because Gunpowder Gamble got its buff, and it's an extra ability. It's fun. People want to have value and have fun things in their subclass, right? Extra reload speed and handling is totally fine on headshot kill or dodge, right? It's great, sure. It's not going to push you ahead in the damage phase. It's not going to make your regular gunplay any more exciting, really. Most guns you're able to increase their reload speed, or you're not really worried about it because you have other things going on to make up for that. Gunslinger is, as the name implies, supposed to be a weapon platform, and it's a good weapon platform, but you can be just as good with much more explosive results on Prismatic. Now, following that up, we're going to go ahead and break into Stasis. Stasis is in a much better place, I think, after the changes in Revenant and Heresy. So we've got extra damage on shattering targets. Crystals did not get that buff, just the targets, but it's a lot of damage for shattering a group of enemies because they will also hit each other, and each one that hits each other will do full damage. So if you have a group together, shattering is very powerful. Even just one target, it is strong. So keep aware of that. Shatter is very good. You have Frost Armor now, which is a much better damage buff. Sorry, a much better damage resist than Whisper of Chains used to be. Very consistent. You can carry it throughout. If you are running Whisper of Rhyme to increase the cap and the duration, you'll get like 13 seconds of 50% DR basically. Very, very strong. Every class has a way to build into it with their Harvest aspect, which kind of locks you into running Harvest on most builds, but you're not really thinking about not running it. It is the only way to spawn Stasis Shards consistently, and then you get minor healing for each Stasis Shard you pick up. We're talking like 5 HP per shard, which isn't amazing, but it's something on top of the Frost Armor. But we are seeing some Stasis nerfs, as in we are losing the Unstop access. It's just going to be Overload for both slow and freeze, I guess, which makes this the only class that's not going to have 2 anti-champion modifiers. In addition, you don't have a CC that is exploitable as Suspend. And when I say exploitable, I mean Suspend will suspend your target, and you can dump as much damage as you want into him for the duration, which is pretty good. Stasis will freeze a target, but when you deal damage, it will break them out, and they'll start, killing you again. So there is this strange balance you have to strike in your head of, do you want to freeze the target so that you are either not taking damage for a certain duration, and then you can dump into them for some high burst damage, or do you take Suspend and you suspend them and you can do as much damage as you want, but they are going to break out sooner because Suspend is pretty strong. I think Stasis feels like it lasts longer. There's this mix up, right, between the two. They both do very similar things. But Stasis does have a lot of synergy where it will build back into itself. Shards will give you melee energy and they're very easy to spawn. Whisper of Shards will give you grenade regen for breaking crystals. Whisper of Torment will give you a lot of grenade regen for taking damage, as well as having Stasis armor and taking damage will give you even more. So there's very good engines in Stasis, I think, even better than Strand. So it really depends on the exotic and how you feel about the two. But yeah, let's go ahead and put some Stasis classes on the board. But yeah, let's go ahead and put some Stasis classes on the board. We're going to start with Shadebinder. So Shadebinder is going to go in the A tier. And I know what you're thinking. Shadebinder is really good. We've got Bleak Watchers. We got Rhymecoat on here. We've got Osmios on here, which is amazing. You can use Whisper of Shards to have 100% uptime on basically any grenade. You can use Whisper of Torment if you're using Cold Snaps. You don't really have to worry about very much because you can take Icebreaker with this build and then keep getting kills. What you are missing out on is Devour. And Prismatic Warlock has Bleak Watcher, it has Cold Snaps, and it has Devour on top of that. It's not as consistent as Stasis with Whisper of Shards, because you have to get kills, but in most content you are expecting to get kills the most time anyways, so it doesn't really hurt to be on Devour. It is a benefit in terms of healing and your general sustain. So it's taken the wind out of Stasis Warlock a bit. Now, Stasis Warlock is still very strong. You do have you do have Rift to keep you alive. You have a little bit of healing from your shards, and Warlock has probably the best shard aspect, the best harvest. where freezing enemies gives you shards. You don't have to get a kill. You don't even have to shatter them. Just freezing them will get you a shard, or up to 3 depending on the tier of the enemy. So very consistent freeze effect. Very consistent for building up those stacks. You will probably hit the cooldown faster on this than anybody else, but that's pretty inconsequential most of the time. You have the option of running Ice Flare Bolts, and if I had to pick one aspect that was the best aspect in the game, Ice Flare Bolts is up there in contention. I know Bleak Watcher is very good, very consistent for the uptime, but Ice Flare Bolts is very free value. It works with almost everything on the Stasis kit for Warlock, as well as every weapon that has Choke Clip, like this will integrate with that, where when you shatter a target, it will just set out a Seeker to freeze a new target, and that chains multiple times. It's very, very powerful. It can refreeze the same enemy, so some champions, depending on where they're standing, if it's a barrier champion, you can be like unfreezing them when you break shatter it, and then it will turn back around and refreeze them before they can put their barrier up. So that's like a very strong effect in some cases. But I think it is very strong, very powerful crowd control. Great when enemies are nearby to hit each other with shatter. But Prismatic has taken a lot of the wind out of its sails, and a lot of healing on Prismatic is just very good. The real big weak point for Stasis Warlock is its super. It is bad, even if you're using its exotic. Shadebinder super is subpar. No one will use it, even on Prismatic. And that's like the main benefit of running Prismatic. You get to run Nova Bomb. You get to run Song of Flame. You get to run Storm Trance, even. Needle Storm. Everything's better, pretty much, than Winter's Wrath, unfortunately. Behemoth Titan, also really great. Icefall Mantles come out. It's going to go in A tier as well. These are not really ranked within their tiers. So if you're looking at this and you're like, oh my god, Stasis Warlock is totally better than Stasis Titan, they're on the same tier for me. I don't really think about them competing that much. You know, they're on different classes. Potato, potato. Now, Stasis Titan, I really like, because with the new changes, you get to get shards for shattering an enemy. You don't need to kill anymore. You don't need to be making crystals to get shards, which is a very big buff. A lot of Stasis Titan was revolving around making and destroying crystals, which don't do as much damage as shattering right now. So that change is really good for maintaining, optimal damage on Titan, as well as maintaining your survivability. Now, Icefall Mantle, I think, is very important to Stasis Titan right now, since it's rework where picking up your shards will give you additional healing, because every stack of Frost Armor is healing. So if you combine the Harvest with Icefall, I think you're getting like 15 to 20 HP per shard. When you proc your Icefall Mantle, you're going to freeze everything around you, which will give you full stacks because you're popping Icefall. And if you have Rymon, that's like almost a full heal. And then when you shatter the enemies nearby, that'll make more shards, and when you pick them up, you'll get more healing on top of that. Just doing that shatter is enough to kill most enemies in the game, like anything that's a red bar. Some majors might survive that if there's not enough enemies nearby. But it is a great burst of damage if you're in there. You have the great movement of the melee right now, which was buffed because if you don't get a hit, it gives you most of the cooldown back. It's basically a shoulder charge. If you do hit things right now, it does much more damage. The knockback's pretty fun, although if it didn't knock them back, it might be a bit better to freeze enemies nearby. But it has a freeze basically on hit, an AoE freeze, which will get you more shatters, which will give you more shards. You can run any grenade here. There's not like a standout grenade for Titan, but since Cold Snaps have been buffed, I've been really enjoying Cold Snaps even on other non-Warlock classes because they're a very instant way to freeze. But even just if you want to bring crystals, or if you want to bring dusk fields for some defensive purposes, those are great. Lock down an area, block off line of sight, great use cases. If you are running Stasis Titan, you're probably running Diamond Lances, in my opinion. They have very low cooldown. They have integration with Frost Armor when you slam them. They will freeze enemies instantly. They can reproc themselves. They can give you some room to breathe. So very flexible option, very easy to spawn. Howl of the Storm is still good, but I would only use that if you're trying to focus on crystals more, in which case you'd be using Hoarfrost, and you're not really getting much damage out of that. But if you want to be defensive or build some quick defensive structures and try and shatter things and launch them off the map, because you can do that, and it's really funny. Still a good build. Very useful actually during the super if you want to focus on single target damage on a smaller target. Using Howl of the Storm, you can get infinite uses of that while you're in your super. Instead of doing like heavy attacks, you could spam like a small line of crystals to get them all on target. So that's pretty good for boss damage. but you're not using like Cryoclasm very much. You are building into those shatters. So I think these are both very safe. They don't have a ton of sustain, but they do have sustain built into them. But they are kind of outclassed by just being Prismatic, because on Prismatic you are still able to run, Behemoth Super. You have Diamond Lances, which are very strong. You aren't getting as much Frost Armor unless you're getting Orbs, which for the most part you don't really worry about. It is happening pretty often. You do have to watch the timer a little bit more. It's much easier for them to fall off on Prismatic than on Stasis. But you have, Knockout on. You've got other healing methods. If you're running anything else, you take Restoration instead. And you can pair that with any of the Stasis abilities that you really want to be using on top of Transcendence. So Stasis is just, it's not competing with Prismatic. And that's why it's so far down. Finally, for Stasis, we have Stasis Hunter. Stasis Hunter is also going to go in B tier next to Golden Gun. Because if you're using Stasis Hunter, you are probably only using it because you want to use Renewal Grasp with the enhanced Dustfield grenades. That is like the main thing that it has that Prismatic doesn't, is your Dustfield would be bigger and your Crystal will be bigger, and it will last a little bit longer if you have Durance on. Durance is a pretty good effect for Hunter specifically, and for Bleak Watcher. You want an extra 5 seconds on Bleak Watcher. Now, on Stasis Hunter, if you're running Mask of Fealty, you could probably get just as good, if not better, effects out of Prismatic Hunter, where you have Transcendence to give you cooldown back, and you're building Transcendence, and you have just getting kills will give you melee energy. Now, the main drawback why Stasis Hunter is lower than the other two Stasis is because Hunter's Harvest aspect is the only one that relies on getting kills to give you shards. You will get large shards for killing majors while they are debuffed with Stasis, but if somebody else gets last hit, or you're not using Chill Clip or something and it drops off right before you kill them, you get nothing, right? You freeze a bunch of enemies and then you shatter them and they're all left with 1 HP, and then you kill them, you get nothing. So there is this like weird thing where Hunter's trying to spec into slow, which just leads to freeze, and freezing, if you don't get a kill, doesn't spawn you a shard. And if you kill them right after because they're significantly weakened by the shatter, then you also don't get a shard. Little weird synergy things, right? There's also like not much in the kit that works together. We have a grenade aspect, and we've got the harvest aspect, which is like the strong suits. And you've got Winter Shroud, which wants you to be very close range to get the dodge. The slow will give you your cooldown back. This might be more synergistic when you don't have to dodge next to enemies to get it back, because we have a ranged melee. Typically, if you're trying to use a ranged melee, you want to be playing at range. You can take advantage of not having to be close. But with Winter's Shroud, you have to be close to get the slow. This does give you very good freeze up time. So it is still a strong aspect, but it's really only you're taking it if you're running Mask of Fealty on Stasis. And if you want to be running Mask of Fealty, you should probably be on Prismatic, where you're getting the extra damage from running something like where you can still get the extra damage from fissures, because there's the fragment that does the same amount of damage on Stasis for shattering frozen targets. You can use Transcendence to get other elements. You can run Gunpowder Gamble with this. You can run Invis with that. All very powerful options compared to getting a kill on a Stasis afflicted target to get a shard for some Frost Armor and some minor healing. I think Shatter Dive has like no use case. You can Shatter Skate. I'll give you that. Stasis Hunter can still Shatter Skate. But using Shatter Dive in combat's not very great. I think it would be pivotal. It'd be really good, maybe, if Shatter Dive did more damage to frozen PvE combatant. Like, a lot more damage if you're using it. Because you have to give up something to use that. You have to either give up your shards, or you have to give up your slow dodge, or your dodge, or your slow giving dodge cooldown, or you have to give up your enhanced grenades. All of which are very, very strong. And I think it's very much to ask to take Shatter faster as an option in PvE. Shatter Dive feels cool to do, so I would like to see that changed. Building into Shatter on Hunter feels like it should be a fun thing. Building into slow is not rewarding unless you're getting a freeze. Slow is like a pretty subpar stats effect for the most part. There are some enemies that are really fast, they'll chase you down, and you slowing them is helpful, like Wyverns, but in general you want the freeze over anything else. Obviously, this is still very powerful in endgame. This is great with Renewal Grasp. 100% uptime on those grenades that is much harder to achieve on Prismatic with Renewal Grasp. You have higher stacks on your charges, which will get you, more DR. I think it's really fun. Obviously, if you get a crystal, you can use it as cover as well. So it's not like unusable in endgame. I just think anything you can do on Stasis Hunter, you can also do on Prismatic Hunter with a bit more of a skill ceiling. From our second S to our third S, we're going to go ahead and take a look at Strand now. Strand is going to get a buff where we are going to get extra duration on your Suspend. Suspend is already strong. It's weaker on champions. I mean, we're talking like 4 seconds. And at that point, even with the extended duration effect, you are not suspending a champion for as long as their debuff is active. So while you stun them like an unstop, right? They're getting suspended, they're going, ooh, I'm suspended. You lose the suspend effect. They're breaking out of suspend, they're moving, they're shaking their heads, but they're still stunned. So then they land, they glitch out, and they go back to the stun animation, and then they come out again. So all this time where you could be landing a headshot or something, you're trying to account for them shaking and then immediately unshaking as soon as their feet touch the ground. And it feels like even if you, aren't stunning them, if they are not able to fight back, you're just losing this time where you could be dealing damage. Getting 1 second extension on like red bars and stuff, pretty good. They're already suspended for about like 7 seconds if you have the extension on there. So red bars and majors, it's already very strong on. This will just feel better. But for champions, we're going from like 4 to 5. And with that, the extended effect might go from an extra 1 to 2 seconds. Which if we're up to 7 seconds on the debuff there for suspending champions, we're looking at some significant power boost here. Much safer, I think, for running a lot of suspend builds. But Woven Mail being dropped to 5 seconds on Strand itself, I think was overkill. Like, Threat of Warding was really good with 10 seconds. I don't think it was 5 seconds worthy. 5 seconds on Prismatic feels fair, right? You have so many other buffs you're working with. Woven Mail being 5 seconds, you're making so many orbs is like totally fine. I think that works. For Strand specifically, I mean, Warlock and Hunter basically feel like they don't have a way to build into having Woven Mail almost at all, unless you're running the exotic on Hunter. And if you are running Warlock, your only option is Threat of Warding. And having to pick up an orb every 5 seconds, it doesn't stack. Like, I get if Prismatic doesn't stack, but maybe on Strand, it should stack up to 10 seconds. If you pick up like 3 or 4 orbs, you can get up to 10, 15 seconds. And it caps out kind of like Devour. I feel like that's a much safer effect to work with that will provide more consistent value to classes like Warlock and Hunter who are relying on the orbs instead of wanting to have Woven Mail at all. Titans have like 2 ways of getting Woven Mail, right? We're talking Tangles, we're talking Warding, and we're talking Abeyant Leaps as your exotic boots that will give you on a suspend. So you have multiple ways to build Woven Mail up. And Woven Mail is still like 50% DR, if not more, 55%. Very, very strong DR that you want to have. And for most of these classes, being close range is kind of a really good option. Specifically for Hunter and Titan, you need to be close range to get your suspends off, to get your melees. And it's dangerous. And Hunter doesn't really have that access that it needs. Warlock doesn't have the access that it wants. Warlock doesn't even have Sever built into his class, which is crazy. So while we are going to be going up with the artifact a bit, Strand needs some work, I think. And that goes for all of these classes, except for Titan. Titan, if anything, this is probably going above Arc. Strand Titan came together so perfectly. Like when it came out, we had the suspend build. We had Dringer's Lash, and we had Woven Mail with Tangle, so you didn't have to run the Fragment. It was very strong back then. We were having a great time with suspend builds. Then suspend got nerfed, and we got Flechette Storm, and we're running, Worm Gods. We're running Feedback Fence, running Synthos with just doing Flechette Storm, and that was very strong. Very good melee damage with range. Right, you have a safe melee option, and you can pair that with getting Woven Mail. While you have Woven Mail, it gives you faster cooldown on your melees, and as more melees you have, the faster they cool down. So very, very self-synergistic setup there, right? Then we get Banner of War put in the game. We're getting a melee kill, a finisher kill will give you that banner, which gives your entire team healing over time. And the more kills you get, the longer the duration lasts and the faster it heals your entire team. And the more melee damage your entire team gets while you have it up, the more sword damage you get. Banner of War, how do I put this? Is probably the best aspect in the game. Like Devour is really good, but there's other ways to get Devour, and it's almost comparable. Um, Hellion, very good. Probably better ways to deal with anything. You're running, solar, and you're thinking about running sunspots. I think sunspots require you to get a kill, yeah, but they're in one spot. You need other things to get your teammates to use them. Banner of War, just you get a melee or a finisher, and your entire team gets healing. Your entire team gets melee damage, and the melee damage is maxed out at stack 1. So it's hard to argue that Banner of War is not alone making Strand Titan S tier. Once you are playing Strand Titan and you've got these melee bonuses and you've got so many ways to boost your melee damage, and your Frenzied Blades do great damage on their own, and they sever so you're taking less damage, along with the built-in woven mail support without needing a fragment. You don't need orbs, you just need tangles, and all your abilities apply Strand debuffs, so you have no issue making tangles. This gives you bonus damage on grapple melees that Strand Hunter doesn't have. Even if you weren't running fragments at all, I think this would be a very self-sufficient and powerful subclass. Obviously, being a Strand class, you only have one super. It is a roaming super. But hey, it gives you your Frenzy Blade charges back. It does decent DPS. So in most content where you need to be doing DPS and you're not really worried about your total damage, or you don't need T-Crash, you're doing fine. If you're doing Tractor Cannon in a lot of raid scenarios, doing Tractor 1-2 punch with Synthos and the melee with Banner of War, great damage. You could proc Tractor and then switch to your super, and that will give you your full charges back on your melee, because you're not going to last long enough for Tractor to wear off. It is a really great build even to this day, and it will continue to be good because it's not getting nerfed. Suspend's getting even better if you want to build into Shackle Grenade at all, or if you just want to take Drenger's Lash and take Banner of War with that. You could be safe in getting all this healing with the Suspend. If you want to build into Flechette Storm and Banner of War with something like Wishful Ignorance, crazy. Amazing uptime on everything. Great DR. Great enemy damage reduction. Great healing. I mean, there's not much more you could ask for apart from giving Strand a one-off super like it had in the original trailer. Strand Warlock, gonna go down to B tier. Weaver's Call is probably one of the best things that Strand Warlock's gonna have. Threadlings is like their specialty. You get perched threadlings. Your threadlings can come back to you if you make extra. Weaver's Call is going to let you make more threadlings just on every 3 weapon kills. You'll be making threadlings, which will send out and do more damage. Start of Evolution is obviously a fragment, but Warlock makes the best use of it. Your super has threadlings involved. Almost all of your aspects involve threadlings. Weaver's Call gives you threadlings on kill or on rift. Your Wanderer upgrades your tangles to suspend enemies, so you just get to suspend on tangles, making your tangles very, very powerful. You have the option of taking Weave Walk, which makes you basically invis for your melee charges, and then it gives you perched threadlings while you're invis. You can use damage over time to launch those threadlings while you're generating them, but the issue with that is they will be dealing like half damage at most, maybe even less. So it's not really great damage to do that, but it is something notable. If you are just wanting to use your melee damage to make threadlings, you will get that with Weaver's Call. You will get that by just hanging out in Weaver's Trance, and then if you will get that by just hanging out in Weave Walk. If you want to run Mind Splendification to upgrade your grenades, you can make your threadling grenades perch. You get 5 full threadlings instead of 3 threadlings, which is great total damage, not great DPS. You could take Grapple Grenade, and if you want to build into grapples, you will get more damage out of your grapples, because it'll basically give you a threadling grenade on top of your grapple grenade. And if you want to run Suspend Grenade and you eat the grenade, you get 25 seconds basically where every kill makes a suspending explosion, which is ridiculous. And you can stack that with like necrotics. So this is like a great necrotics style class. It does fall off because, like like I said, you don't have woven mail up all the time. Very hard to get damage resist. You have no access to sever without some kind of weapon setup. You need a weapon to do it. But Swarmers gives you a great Threadling build. Makes your Threadlings unravel, which gives you great AoE. It's basically like a little poison effect, free value, and lets them make tangles, so you can be a bit more consistent with your tangles. The Wanderer is a great utility option for adding more suspend to the build, more anti-champion. Very safe to use. If you shoot it or you pick it up, it works. And then, just being a Warlock, you have a lot of options for class neutral exotics to take in with you as well. I think Prismatic is a better use case for Weaver's Call because it's not going to be reliant on Strand anymore. But Strand itself is just not in the best place, and you're going to be getting Woven Mail in the same way on Prismatic as you would on Strand. You're giving up a little bit of suspend, but Matiodoxia gives you that suspend even on Prismatic. But my final Strand complaint here, and the only option that's going to be in this tier, is Threadrunner going to C tier. Threadrunner disappoints me so much. Threadrunner was my favorite class. On launch, we had infinite firepower and we had infinite grapple grenades, and I was crossing the gap in King's Fall and just bypassing jump puzzles in Vow of the Disciple, which was really fun. Admittedly broken, I get that. The nerf hit hard, but it was good for a while. Suspend was still strong. We were going in very dangerous to do your slam. Our suspend option is a skydive into a group of enemies, right? Which is very dangerous. And right now, you can use Certarachnes to get Woven Mail, which means you have to be using Grapple Grenade. And if you're using Grapple Grenade, you want to be using Widow's Silk so that you can continue to chain it and make grapple points, which will free up your ability to move and give you this kind of play style, in theory, where you're using Grapple Grenade and using that half cooldown tech where you jump in the middle of doing it to use half the charge to make a grapple point. You can make like 2 grapple points and set that up for your team to go around grappling and move around an encounter space. You want to be consistently grappling and maintaining high mobility and getting grapple melees off. The issue is you are committing so much to being a grapple melee build that when you're grappling in, you have to choose between doing the slam or doing the grapple melee. And if you do the slam, you then got to turn around and go back for the grapple melee. And sometimes it gets weird if you get to have the momentum to do it or not when you're turning around. And on top of that, you have no way on the class or on Hunter to increase your grapple melee damage. There's no exotic that's class agnostic that boosts it. There's no exotic for Hunter that boosts it. Your only options are getting Woven Mail for grappling, getting increased Threaded Spectre value and increased cooldown on Threaded Spectre. We're talking like double or more cooldown time to your dodge for running that. Or the new one from the Edge of Fate, where throwing your Threaded Spike will pick up and duplicate a tangle for you if you catch it. Which is fine. I mean, I'll talk about Mirai a little bit. Mirai, I think, is going to be really weird, and it's going to feel bad because it specifically will seek out and target tangles, and when it hits a tangle, it will stop targeting enemies. So one of the most useful things that Threaded Spike does is sever enemies. Hunters have great uptime on sever because you can throw out this Threaded Spike and it bounces to multiple targets, and then when you catch it, you can get all of it back if it hit 5 enemies and you catch it, or most of it back if it hit 5 enemies at all. You'll get like 70%. So with that uptime, you have very good sever uptime. So it's very safe to throw that out and play like a mid-range brawler setup. To stack that with grapple is a bit weird because you have to wait for it to go around and hit targets and then come back, and sometimes get stuck on terrain and won't come back. So you're standing there until you realize you're never going to get that back, and then the sever's worn off. And if you don't catch it, you don't get the full cooldown back and you're waiting. So it's clunky to use. It's not very synergistic, and none of your aspects really work together, right? Widow's Silk makes you want to do this very fluid, rapid, moving around playstyle, not in cover, but enemies are so accurate in high tier content that just Woven Mail is not enough for you to stay alive. And if you're not running Certarachnes, you don't have Woven Mail at all because you need to be making orbs. But using your Ensnaring Slam doesn't proc Reaper, so you can't make orbs with your weapon kills, and you don't have a consistent option in endgame for scaling your melee damage up to make it with Orb Maker. And your best grenade option is pretty much grapple grenades, but it takes you like 3 or 4 to 5 grapple grenades to do significant damage to majors in endgame because you have no intrinsic way to boost your damage with your grapple melee. So the only thing that you have that gives you any sort of damage increase on the entire class is Whirling Maelstrom, which means you're either not taking Suspend, you're not taking your grapple, or you're taking Threaded Spectre, which is like, it sucks so bad. They nerfed it for PvP, where it gives you basically half the cooldown time to your dodge. You're taking almost double the time to recharge your dodge. You don't get Threadlings if you break it. Your enemies have to destroy it. It doesn't spawn Threadlings if it times out. And if you're running the exotic for it, it gives you even slower cooldown time. All because of PvP. If you are running Whirling Maelstrom will do good total damage. It takes like 15 seconds to do its damage. I'm sorry, 12 seconds. And it'll do about 200k over that time, which is nothing to scoff at, right? It is decent additional damage. And you can grapple the Tangle to do some grapple melee shenanigans. But it's wonky because it's moving all the time. It's right in the enemy. And sometimes the game will just prioritize the enemy over the Tangle, even though you were aiming at it. And then, whoopsies, sorry, you don't have grapple anymore. You've grappled into the enemies, you meleeed into them, they're not dead, you have Woven Mail, but you don't have your Sever because your thing's on cooldown, you didn't do enough damage, and now you just die. There's nothing you can really do about it. Sure, maybe you saved a second grapple to get out, but then were you ever using Weavers? Were you ever using your aspect to make the grapple points? We're using this to do reload tech. The best use case for this for a lot of people is grappling the ground at your feet to proc reloads with Ascent. And that's sad because this class could be very strong. Suspend is a strong effect. If it procced any of your dodge cooldown effects, anything like Reaper or Bomber or Dynamo, it would be very powerful. But you can't do that. You don't have very strong integration with grapple, even though it's like one of the main focuses of your aspects is grapple, and you don't get much out of it. We have an entire dedicated exotic to grapple that doesn't make it any stronger. We have an entire dedicated aspect to Threaded Spike. Sorry, we have an entire dedicated exotic coming up to Threaded Spike that makes Threaded Spike worse at dealing with enemies. Yeah, you get 2 Whirling Maelstroms, but you already had infinite uptime on him because the cooldown of Tangles was shorter than the uptime on Whirling Maelstroms. So cool, you get to have 2 of them. I'm not even sure the damage stacks on them. That'll be a funny thing to test if they don't stack. But you're also going to be missing that Sever utility when you need it the most. So all in all, Strand Hunter doesn't have much synergy with itself. And if you're going to be running Strand stuff, running it on Prismatic just feels better. Taking Synthos makes Grapple Melee Hunter feel so much better. You don't have infinite tethers because you don't have the grapple point, but you can just run Navigator like that with everybody in your class would, and you'll have that with Synthos, or you can run Verities, you can run Hoyle with it, you can still have your Woven Mail, and you're going to feel better about it. You're going to have more healing on top of that. Whirling Maelstrom is not going to be the end of the world, because you're going to have Gunpowder Gamble to work with, you're going to have Invis built in. It's just, I wish Strand Hunter had some kind of synergy within itself to take it further. The only thing that I think is worth taking in the endgame that gives you a significant power boost for playing this class is Whirling Maelstrom, and it isn't exciting to use. It's like, yeah, my Tangles do something cool, and then you sit around. Like, maybe your best bet is doing a Suspend build. Hunter has good Suspend builds, but you don't want to take Ensnaring Slam with that. You want to take the double grenade charge, disregard the entire part about grapple, and just take Shackle Grenades and take something that does Suspend, like Wish Keeper, because that Suspend will help you feed into the extra damage. It'll recharge your Shackle Grenades. That'll give you some unstop effects, and it'll keep you safe. Because if you go in, you die. If Certarachnes worked with every grenade, like the one on Prismatic does, and there was this thing where they wanted the single exotic to be a bit more potent than its Prismatic counterpart. This doesn't have that. This needs that. Why does this not have intrinsic usage with all of your Strand grenades at this point. You know, if you're able to throw shackle grenades and get woven mail, I think Prismatic, I think Strand Hunter would move further up. Just with that, grapple wouldn't get much better. But being able to use Threadling Grenade or Shackle Grenade and do a suspend build from mid-range would at least give Hunter a safe setup. Using that with Whirling Maelstrom would probably feel a lot better than anything you can do right now, and it's probably going to be better than anything you can do with Mirai. So sorry to be a doomer, Strand Hunters, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I just think in the value that you're trying to squeeze out of a subclass, Strand Hunter falls so far short of like Arc right now, unfortunately. And that is just the nature of Bungie doing balancing around PvP, apparently. It feels bad, man. And I feel the same way about Bastion. You know, Bastion did not need a PvE nerf because of PvP, but here we are, right? So our last subclass tree is going to be Void. Void, I think, was the flagship 3.0 rework, and it came ahead very strong. I think Void is still very powerful. It has a very well fleshed out utility kit, right? We've got Volatile, we've got Invisibility, we've got Overshields, we have Devour. Oppression's strong, Weaken's very good. All of these are very fleshed out, and they have a lot of different weapon things that will work into them to let you apply them. And while every class has some kind of specialization, they all have access to Devour. And Devour itself, while it is getting nerfed on the Warlock aspects, it is still going to be pretty much all but mandatory on any Void class. So all of these are getting bonus points for having access to Devour and having heavy access to Weaken. And I think you're going to realize very good grenade options as well, right? We're going to talk about some of these things and how strong they are, so let's take a look at this, right? In the S tier, we are actually going to put 2 Void classes, and that is going to be Void Warlock and Void Hunter. So what I think you're going to notice looking at these is Stasis. Ooh. What I think you're going to notice looking at the list now as we are putting these on is that Warlock and Titan have multiple things that are up in these S tiers, very high up, without Hunter being up there. But Hunter has quite a few that are in the lower S tier, all bunched up together. So I think a lot of the Hunter classes are consistently equal to each other, but the Titan and Warlock classes go a little bit further in their power just overall. So with moving these Void classes up here, let's talk about why, right? Void Warlock, best Devour aspect in the game, paired with Prismatic, obviously. Getting an ability kill gives you Devour. 140 HP going into expansion, double the effect of how much grenade energy you get over regular Devour. In addition, you have Chaos Accelerant, which upgrades your grenades. We're making Vortex grenades last almost twice as long. We're making Magnetic grenades into Handheld Supernova, which is great burst damage, even up into GMs and stuff. We have integration with Child of the Old Gods, which is a wonderful aspect who I think a lot of people have been overlooking. He goes out and he searches out for people to hit, and he will hit them, and he will suck them, and he will cause them all to be weakened. While he is sucking them off, depending on your rift, you'll either get grenade and melee energy if you are running a healing rift, or if you're running an empowered rift for more damage, you'll be getting healing back. Any enemy you kill that is being attacked by the child will directly refund more rift energy, which means it'll feed back into itself, giving you more class ability energy. You can build around that with Briar Binds, which is very fun, right? Or you could just let that be supplemental to the other aspects of your build, to your Devour, to your grenades, to your melee. That is a very great thing to slot in. It brings Weaken to the table on this class. Now you're going to be popping rifts all the time, so kind of a great shoe-in. All-rounder. It makes up for not having Radiant with some kind of damage buff built in. In addition to that, Void Warlock has Nova Bomb, other Nova Bomb, both of which are very good DPS options for your supers. They both do similar damage once they've done their full time. The slower one will do its damage a little bit faster, but it will block your team's ability to shoot them if you're too far away. Vortex takes a little bit longer, but it doesn't block your team's shots, so take your pick depending on the situation. And then Nova Warp is a great roaming super for any content where you're looking to clear ads or work a roaming super in. You have both options, both very strong. And with so many powerful just base options in the kit, you have the ability to like look at the finishers turn you invis fragment and run that if you want just some extra survivability. Being able to turn invis is a great utility. It'll help you get some reses that hunters usually claim for themselves. It gives you pretty much everything you need on the class, as well as being able to build in with volatile now, getting repulsor for overshields built in, or being able to run the fragment that gives you volatile rounds on grenade kill is still very powerful. So I think Voidwalker is still an amazing class to bring into endgame. As long as you are able to get an ability kill or pick up an orb to proc Devour, you'll be seeing much more benefits for it on Void Warlock than any other class. And this will stack with health, just for reference, right? If you are running Void Warlock with the Devour aspect, you're going to get 140 HP when you pick up an orb. If you are running the fragment with both, right? The fragment that gives you Devour and the aspect that gives you Devour and upgrades it. When you pick up the orb, 140 HP. If you have max health stat, you'll get an additional 70 on top of that for 210 HP, which is more than you get now. And then you can take like recuperation on top of that and get 225 if you're weird. But yeah, as long as you build into health a little bit, you're not going to be seeing a ton of difference in your Devour procs on picking up orbs. You will see a little bit reduced efficiency on just kills, but you're going to be making so many orbs that you're not going to feel it as much. Now, Night Stalker also being an S tier. These two options for Hunter are your, solar are your solo element like options for endgame. Arc Staff, Arc Hunter, and Void Hunter both provide very different utility to your endgame. Arc Hunter is the better kill everything without dying class because you get to one-shot things and then turn invis. With the melee changes, you're going to be one-shotting things a lot less, but with the hand cannon getting added for really good uptime on 1-2 punch, maybe it'll make up for it a bit in the melee damage stacking. We'll see. Like, I have no implications that while this is falling off a little bit, that it's going to be much worse than it is now because it is just so far ahead of everything else for burst damage. Melee builds are still going to be very good. So Arc does that. Void specializes in the team play aspect of Hunter, right? You've got good damage effects. You've got good grenade bonuses with persistence. Remnants. Persistence will give you more invis and devour time. Obviously, devour is going to give you healing. It is a bit more reliable healing than combination blow. It will never scale negatively like combination blow is right now, where the more kills you get with combination blow, the less healing you get. So building into that, you are able to get infinite invis engines if you're running your Falcons and the Stylish. You just kind of keep going in and out. So you are able to clear through chaff very safely as long as you are popping out, causing volatile, getting a kill. We'll go back in. You can keep invis dodge, which is a very consistent option to go invis. You can take trappers to give your teams invis. This is very good for dangerous situations in like GMs or in a lot of raid situations. Turning people invis, getting the refunds with Omni is very consistent. You can use On the Prowl. I think On the Prowl is actually a very strong aspect. It is something that you have to build a little more into if you want to take full advantage of it, right? You have to go and kill that target. If you don't kill them, they will stay marked for basically ever. So if it marks a major, you want to bring something that can kill majors reliably. Personally, I think rocket sidearms or Choir of One are very good to take with that, or even glaives, because you're going to get the glaive weaken, you're going to get the bonus glaive melee damage. I think it's very good to take with this to let you kill majors more reliably and champions that get marked by it just by chance. Killing that target will give you invis if you walk into the smoke bomb. It's going to give you about a third of your ability cooldowns per kill. That's going to go up to about 50% at base. It depends on the tier of the cooldown of your abilities, right? So grenades get a little bit less if you're running Vortex than if you're running Scatter. Your melee is not going to matter because it's smoke bomb, and your dodges are going to be about the same. Now, using those, you have all these very flexible neutral game options. You're very safe pretty much all the time as long as you have a void weapon. And a lot of our legendary weapons have this integration with the stabilizing rounds and repulsor brace and withering gaze and demoralize now to consistently proc it even without your Falcons. That you can focus on things like weaken. Getting the On the Prowl procs makes a weakening cloud. There's a lot of options for that with your undermining grenades, with smoke bombs. Obviously, Tether, your Spectral Blades heavy attack, and Mobius Quiver will all do debuffs. Spectral Blades is a 15% debuff, it's a 15% weaken, which is strong for itself. A bit more ad clear, champion kill than boss kill, but in a pinch, if you want weaken while you're doing a GM, this is a great way to just tag that onto a boss. Tether is the king of clearing out a room of ads in maximum safety, because most of them will be unable to shoot back while they are tethered. 30% bonus damage. If you're running Orpheus rigs, you can get half of it back and then very quickly build it back up. And Mobius Quiver gives you the option of blanketing a wider area while also building a bit more into single target damage if you want that damage with this class. Or someone pointed out in a different video, if you are running something like Time Lost Magazine, apparently every launch of Mobius Quiver will refill the magazine. So that if you get the 3 shots off, that'll be 3 reloads. I haven't personally tested that to see if it does work, but that is what I was told. So check that out. Might be a nice niche trick to use in your next, master endgame content. But yeah, you've got a ton of really good options with Void Hunter. There are a lot of exotics that are built to work with it, and a lot of things that it doesn't get taken by Prismatic. I mean, the main outstanding thing was Stylish, and Stylish on Void Hunter is better. It works with every debuff, right? But at least on regular Void Hunter, you have dodge invis, you have team invis, and you have on the prowl giving you more cooldowns. You have Devour, which is a great thing that Prismatic Hunter doesn't have. So it still gets up to S tier if you're not running Prismatic. If you have to run a solo class, you're never going to be off put or having a bad time in endgame if you're on Void Hunter. Taking this into any raid, this will be what you're running if you're not running Nighthawk. Finally, our final class here is going to be obviously Sentinel Titan. This Void Titan build is very strong. I think it's going into A tier only because the other Titan builds are so much more powerful than it. The infinite restoration of sunspots is kind of on a tier different than having Devour on Void Titan. Then again, Void Titan does have Volatile, and Volatile on Void Titan, if you're using Controlled Demolition, which will make all your abilities apply it, and it'll make Volatile Detonations apply Volatile, will make Volatile Detonations also heal you and all nearby teammates by a pretty large chunk. It's about 70 HP per explosion. And it doesn't have to be you that's doing it. Your teammates doing Volatile Explosions will also heal everybody. But when you do it, it will spawn more Volatiles on any enemies that are hit that live. So, very powerful chaining effect. With the new Volatile Rounds effect on destabilizing rounds, it's gotten even better. The downside is on Prismatic, you still have access to Devour if you're running Mask of the Quiet One. You still have axes. You have Knockout giving you some of that melee damage, and you can build into Consecration to clear ads. It is a bit more work to make Void Titan work. Unbreakable's still not as fun and as simple to use on this class. You do have great uptime here with something like Ursa's, giving you recovery back on blocking with your Sentinel Shield if you're using that for GMs. Using Doomfangs for the extension is very powerful. You have Bubble, which is obviously a good defensive option, but with Bubble losing its damage buff, it's slipped even further away from being high on the list. Like it used to be, hey, at least if you're on Titan, you have something to compete with well, and it's lost that without running Helm, which with Helm having no neutral game has made it just a little bit worse. Now, Bastion is still a very strong effect. You have to wait for the cooldown being increased for your barricades, so it feels a little bit worse unless you're using it with something to make Void Breaches give you cooldown back, or you're working with a melee build that might be pretty good, or no backup plans, getting you shotgun damage is also pretty strong. I personally am partial to running Controlled Demolition on this class because getting an Overshield with Repulsor Brace or any of the other effects on Titan that can give you Overshield, that will give you faster grenade cooldown and boost your melee damage, and getting melee kills while that's active will give you more Overshields. So yeah, if you're running Controlled Demolition with Offensive Bulwark, your neutral melee while you have an Overshield will cause volatile detonations, which is pretty funny and pretty good for explosions. It is not as simple to play. It is not as free value as Solar and Arc and Strand, so that's why it has fallen to A tier. However, like I said, everything in here that's like B tier up is like, yeah, load into endgame and you'll be pretty fine. You're going to have to work with the B tiers. A tiers are going to be kind of free value, very powerful, very consistent. S tiers are going to almost play the game for you. S plus tiers are easy clear, and triple S's are free to do whatever you want. You're going to break the game. That's how they feel. That's how they work. I'm interested to see if once we get to tune difficulty with the portal, if this changes anything. Like, do these A tiers become more potent because you're able to manipulate the difficulty in a way that these rise up, these fall down, and you're able to get better drops? I don't know. We'll see. By the way, that is the full list right now. Do I leave any notes over here for Sentinel? Oh, yeah. Bubble's not as good. You do have Axes, which is a great in-between for a one-off super and a roaming super. And you do have Sentinel Shield here if you want to be a support, or if you want to provide bonus damage with that 40% bonus damage and kill ads. Still does that very well. Sentinel Titan is very flexible for all ways of playing. Melee builds, it's very powerful grenade builds, very powerful weapon platform. It can do all of those things at the same time. You can apply weaken, you can keep overshields in there, you can throw powerful grenades. It's kind of a jack of all trades, kind of what Gunslinger wants to be doing, but with more utility. So finally, that is the end of this. This is going to be very pushed out, so if there's some weird pauses and stuff while I look around at my notes and things, I apologize. I can't cut the whole thing down because it's going to take forever. It is already taken very long to plan this, so I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope maybe you've got some information about the way that I see the game. If you have any weird niche thing that might push these things up or down on the list, let me know. I think, like I said, all of these are viable, except maybe Strand Hunter. Strand Hunter kind of feels like you have to give up everything to play it. You have to give up healing to play it. You have to give up consistent value to play it. You have to almost give up your CC to run two fragments at the same time, or sorry, two aspects at the same time, because none of them work together. So I think Threadrunner is actively working against you at all times while you have it equipped, and everything else is just, could be better, could be worse, could be broken. I will see you guys again tomorrow. Tomorrow we are doing builds, so I don't know what class we're doing first. I'm going to surprise you guys with what class gets the build video, but that is tomorrow. So I will see you all again very, very soon.